Okay, guys, so this is a video just to kind of go over if you didn't understand problems from the review. So really, if I were you, what I would do is, if you don't understand the problem, if you do understand how I got to that answer, that solution, then just move on to the ones you don't get and just fast forward until you don't. I mean, if you haven't been able to, hopefully what you did was you looked at your problem, what you did, and you looked at what I set up and you saw your mistake. And if you saw your mistake, then you learn from it and you could do it right and get the same answer I did, then you're fine. If your biggest mistake was you weren't writing out the answers, okay, then I mean the worst that's going to happen is you're just not going to get a 4 on the quiz, because if you don't write out the answers, you don't get a 4. Okay, so make sure you're writing out the answers. I mean, it's that simple. It's just, it tells me you know what you just found. And I've seen students already that have come up with a problem like this. And although what they found was the part, they said it was 3.6%, which means you don't know what you found. So make sure you're doing that. Remember that everything hinges on this proportion. This proportion is the source of the percent equation. And I've shown you in class how that happens. So, I mean, basically what we did was we solved for the part. And so we multiplied both sides times the whole. And if you look, that means we get the part equals the percent over 100 times the whole. That's where we get the percent equation. Just so happens that that works really well when you're trying to find the part. And honestly, for me, that's what I would use. But if you still don't understand the percent equation and you went through it and you did your best at it, then use that proportion, because the proportion will always get you the answer if you do it right. Remember, you're going to show your cross product equation. So if I was looking at this one here, what is 15% of 24? If I wasn't using the percent equation, I'd be saying I have 100 times P equals 15 times 24, which means 100P equals 360. And so I'm going to divide both sides by 100. It means the part equals 3.6. And then I look and I remember that, okay, I'm doing the part, and that's over here. I rewrite my answer. I just fill in what is, and that what is the part, and that is 3.6 is 15% of 24. Okay. So when I look at this next problem, okay, again, if I'm using the cross product equation, then I mean, because I'm assuming that if you didn't get what this was about, then you probably need to just stick to this. And we just say that that's going to be X for the percent. So what we wind up with is 30 times 100 equals 48 times X. That's going to give me 3,000 equals 48 times X. I'm going to divide both sides by 48. I'm going to get that X equals 62.5. I look at what I was solving for. I'm solving for the percent. I go back to my answer and I just rewrite the answer. 30 is 62.5% of 48. The only thing I had to do is plug in my answer. If it says round to the nearest whole percent, that's going to be 63%. Again, if you're not sure what we're talking about with the rounding, then go watch the rounding video. Okay. So again, if this is seeming like a waste of your time because you already know how to do this, well, then you should be fast forwarding. If you got all these right, you shouldn't be spending time looking at this part of the video. All right, so again, what we're going to be doing is we would set up, again, I'm doing this the simplest way because if you're looking at this video, that means you got the wrong answers, which means I'm going to go to the simplest pattern that'll get you there every time. Okay, so that means I'm going to do the cross product equation, which will be 36 times 100 equals 75 times W. Okay, and that's going to give me 3,600 equals 75 times W. That's being multiplied, 75 times W, not equal. Some of you have been writing down the equal sign there. That is a mistake. So then I'm going to divide both sides by 75. Okay, and I wind up, that gives me 48. So I go back and look, I was finding the whole. And so that means I've got 75% of 48 is 36. So let me just remind you that what we said was that when we have the part, it's always attached to the word is, and the whole is always attached to the word of, and that's almost always, right? So when I look at this problem, when I look at the problem we just did, the 75%, that's the percent, right? The word of was attached to the what number, and some of you will say, well, it's attached to the percent too. Yeah, but the 75 is only attached to the percent, and 36 is only attached to the word is, so that must make it the part. And so what I'm left trying to find is the whole. Okay, when I look at this next one, they give me the percent. The is attached to the 70. 70 is only attached to is, so it must be the part. And again, it's of what number, which means I'm finding the whole again. So hopefully you're starting to see kind of a pattern. You're just going to set things up, right? Now, when you look at this, okay, so since I'm trying to find the whole, one of the things I showed when you were doing the video was, like, if I multiply both sides times the whole, then these two, this is the whole over 1, so that would the w's would reduce, because w divided by w would be 1. So that leaves me with 70 on this side equals 65 over 100 times w. So if I looked at that, my next step would be to simplify what this is. And so 65, and check it on a calculator. Don't just do it and take the shortcut. You get to use a calculator. So I love that you're going to be looking at it and saying, I think I can do this in my head. Great. Double check with a calculator to be safe. Okay. You've seen me make mistakes, so you got to know you can make mistakes. So this is 0.65 times W equals 70. And then what I'm going to be doing next is, this is 0.65 times W. So I'm going to divide both sides by 0.65. And again, this is where you have to be careful. So you're going to put into the calculator 70, hit the division sign, 0.65, and you get that that's going to be 107.69, which rounds to 107.7 if you're rounding to the nearest tenth. If it tells you to round to the nearest hundredth, you're safe with 107.69, because it's 107.69230077, which would round to 170.69, or if you round in the nearest tenth place value, then it's 107.7. Okay? All right. So when we look at this next one, again, you should be looking at your work because you've already done this, right? You're looking for where your mistake was. So again, if I'm looking at this one, I think what I did here was I just looked at it and said, look, you could do the cross product equation, which would be, okay, first of all, if I look, it says what is. So that's the is only attached to the what, so that's the part. The 65%, that's the percent of 36. 36 is only attached to the of, so that makes it the whole. If I were you, I would be writing all these down on the test. I would write out this sentence, this whole sentence. I would be writing out and label it. Which one's the part, which the whole, which the percent, and then put it in the percent proportion. If you're struggling with how to do the percent equation, just stick to the percent proportion and you'll get the right answer every time as long as you're careful. Because then all you have to do is look at it and say, well, these are my cross products. So I'm going to have that P times 100 equals 36 times 65. So that means P times 100, or 100P, equals 2,340. Then to solve this, I'm going to divide both sides by 100, which means P equals 23.40. Now, even if you think you see the pattern and you think you're right, double check with a calculator. Okay, always double check your work with a calculator. Okay, all right. And then we look at this, that means we have the part. So we take it back and say to our answer that 23.4 is 65% of 36. All we're doing is plugging in the words. Okay, so here's what I would do if I were you is, now we've gone through, what, 4 of them, 5 of them? We've gone through 4 problems now, 5 problems. Now look and see if you could see where your mistakes are on these other 5. If you could see your mistakes on these 5 and you could fix it yourself and you can come up with the answer we did, well, then you just learned and you're going to be successful. So I want you to, right now, what I want you to do is pause. I want you to pause, look at it, and hit the pause button. Look at these problems. Look at what you did for your work and double check and see if you know what you're doing. If you can come up with the answer that I came up with, and if you can understand how I set up these proportions, then you don't need to watch the rest of this video, or at least not this part. You might need to go down to the story problems, but you don't need to watch this part. And if you could do this part, you just passed off 2A. Okay? All right, so hit pause. Let's see how you do with it. Okay, so hopefully you've looked these over, you've seen it, and then I'm just going to stick with the cross product equation. Okay, if you got it right and you did the percent equation, I'm not worried about it, but I want to make sure I'm going to teach one way on this, and then you can go try to push with the percent equation later. But okay, so when I look at this, and even if it asks you on the quiz for the percent equation, don't worry about that. Give me whichever one works best for you. Okay, but you have to show me the proportion or the equation. If you don't show me one of those two when you're trying to solve it, you're not going to get credit, because that's what this is about. Can you use the percent proportion, or can you use the percent equation to solve the problem? That's the purpose. Okay. All right. So when I look at this, then my first one, this is my proportion. When I look, I have that 18 is, and I have of 90. So that means of is always attached to the whole. So that's the whole. 18 is the part. We're trying to find the percent. So the part goes here on the 18. 90 becomes the bottom. I get x times 100, or divided by 100. If I use the cross product equation, I get 90 times x equals 1800, which means now I've got to divide both sides, because 18 times 100 is 1800. I'm going to divide both sides by 90, and I'm going to get that x equals 20. Now what I have to do is go back and see what I was solving for, and I was trying to find the percent. So my answer would be 18 is 20% of 90. Notice nothing changes except for, that's the percent sign, that number where the what was. And that's all we're trying to do, is figure out what that number is. When I look at this one, okay, they give me the percent of what number, so that means that's the whole, because it's attached to the word of, is $86. Okay, so then what I do is I take 86 times 100 and 8 times W. Those two are equal. That's the cross product equation. 8W equals 8600. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 8. And that means W equals 1075. I look at what I'm talking about, and I see on the part I'm talking about money. So 8% of $1,075 is $86. Notice all I did was plug this number in. That's the difference between a 3 and a 4. You set up the equation. That's the difference between a 2 and a 3. Okay, you solve the equation and got the right number. I guess that's you can't get a 3 if you don't at least set up the equation, or the proportion equation. Okay, you can't get a 3 if you're not getting the right number. So you would have had to set up the equation, solve it, and gotten the right number. Okay, that's a 3. You got the right number, but you have to have the answer to get the 4. Because that tells me you know what you found. Okay. Okay, so when I look at this one, again, I'm looking, they're asking me for the percent. The of is attached to the 21, so that's the whole. 30.7 is only attached to the is, so that must be the part. I put things in their place because, again, I have the part over the whole equals the percent over 100 every time on the percent proportion. That's why we're sticking to this if you didn't understand how to use the percent equation. And then we're saying that 21x equals 30.7 times 100, which means we have 21x equals 3070. We divide both sides by 21, and we get that x equals 146.2. Okay, and so when we solve that to get 146.2, we say that 146.2% of 21 is 30.7. If they tell you to round to the nearest tenth, of course you would say, or to the nearest whole percent, you would say 146% of 21 is 30.7. Okay, so on this one, again, we set up the proportion. We looked and said of is the what is attached to the word of, which means we're trying to find the whole. They give us the percent, and the 8.35 is only attached to the word is, so that means it's the part. So I put things in their place. I'm solving for W. I'm going to go ahead and multiply W times 1.97. Understand that that's 9.7 times W. Okay, and then I have 8.35 times 100, which means I'm going to have 9.7 times W equals 835. So then I got to remember this is multiplication. So I undo multiplication with division. So I divide both sides by 9.7. I get that W equals 86.1. Now just to kind of go over this, it really equals 86.0824723, and that's as far as the calculator will take it. But if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, then what we're rounding to is that place value right there, which means that the 8 is bigger than 5, and that means we're going to round up to 86.1. If it said round to the nearest whole, we would say 86. Again, if you're not sure what I just did with rounding, go watch the rounding video. It'll help you out. Okay, so now we look at this problem. Okay, again, by now, you'd be done. Okay, by now, if you already understood this, you don't even have to, you probably already quit watching this video. I'm going to make a separate video just for the story problems. This is the 1A review. Okay, so you would have fast forwarded all the way and seen, oops, it stops. And that's good. Okay. Okay, so here we go. We'll look at this. Now what we're going to have is we do our cross product equation. From that, we set up the proportion. They give us that it's 130% of what number. So the of is attached to the what, which means we're trying to find the whole. Is, and 110.5 is only attached to the P. Only attached to 110.5 is only attached to the is, so that means it's the part. So that means we have 110.5 over W because the part is right here. Again, remember, that's what we're just using this every time, right? Okay, so then now we're going to set up the equation. We get 130W equals 110.5 times 100, which means we'd have 130W. And you plug this into a calculator. You make sure you got it right, okay? And that equals 110.5 times 100 is going to be 11,050. Then we're going to divide both sides by 130, which means W equals 85. Okay, and again, just to remind you, this is the last problem we're going to work on for this video. The next one goes into the story problems, right? Okay, so when we look at this, again, what we did was we solved for the whole. Okay, we set up the cross product equation just to talk about what I'm expecting. Okay, you can't get a 2, you can't get a 3 if you don't at least have the equation or the proportion written out. If you don't have one of those two written out, you get a 2 because you haven't communicated an effective what we're asking you. We're testing whether or not you can set up a percent equation or a percent proportion. Okay, and then you solve it. You would set up the cross product equation, and you'd get W equals 85. Okay. Now, at that point, if that's all you did and you didn't give me an answer, you'd get a 3. Okay, so without this or without the percent equation, you don't get it. You only get a 2. When you do this, you can get a 3 as long as this number is correct. As long as you got that correct, you could have a 3. If you want the 4, you have to rewrite it out. Again, if I were you, I would write that problem, I would write that out every time. At the very top of your cell, I would write out 130% of what number is 110.5. I'd write that out, label the part, the percent, and the whole. And then set up your proportion. Then set up the cross product equation, solve, that gives you your solution, and then write the answer on the bottom and circle your answer. Okay, so now I have done this over and over in class. If you came to the, if you're doing distance learning, then you would have come to the, if you came to the sessions, I told you this. I've made it very clear in every video how we're going to grade. And so there's really no reason for you not to get a 4. Because really, quite simply, you're writing the answer in, and all you're doing is substituting one number in place of the word what. And if you didn't get the percent equation, then use the percent proportion. But you have to be able to show you can do one of the two. It's a skill. Okay, so the rest of it's going to be talking about story problems. I'm just going to make a separate one. Because if you want to know how to do 2A, this is it. If you want to know how to do 2B, you got to be able to do the story problems. Okay? All right, but this is the essential. So, and this took a while, but this was an explanation video. So if you spent 26 minutes and you already knew how to do it, and you spent 30 minutes watching this video, then you wasted your time. But hopefully this is helpful. And when you come in on Monday or Tuesday, you got questions. Okay? All right, good luck.